welcome to the Bald Ambition podcast. I am your very bald host, Mookie Spitz, and my guest today is a Zoomer. I'm a boomer and she's a Zoomer. She is pretty much an archetypal example of a Gen Zer. And we're going to chat within the context of consultative selling, brand identity, differentiation, and excelling in today's chaotic, dynamic marketplace through the lens of what we would consider human resources, hiring the best people, and as an employee, as someone aspiring for success in that market, to shine. And as she'll describe in a second, there are challenges, unique challenges to being a Gen Z person. And it's particularly fascinating to me being the older veteran hoofer of the agency marketing scene and getting to know Hannah and working with her. I felt that bringing her on the podcast would be illuminating to everyone working with, hiring, and being a Gen Zer. So welcome aboard, Hannah.
Thank you, Michael. I will talk a lot about my own experience, but also I find that my experience lines up pretty closely with all of my friends. I have very few friends who have had a completely different experience than me, so hopefully I can speak on behalf of them as well and the problems that most of us seem to be facing.
Yes, that's what struck me vividly when we were just conversing about some of your challenges out there in the workforce. And they seem to resonate with a lot of what I had been reading about and hearing about online. And I think the opportunity to hear it directly from you, and in this sense, for you to be a kind of spokesperson of your generation, would be eminently interesting and valuable to our listeners. So thanks again for jumping on board. Just to give us a frame to work from, tell us a little bit about yourself, your background, and what you really aspire for when you get up in the morning and want to contribute to this crazy economy that we're living in right now.
Sure. So I went to Arizona State University for my education, got my marketing degree, went straight into an in-house marketing team, which at the time, it was during COVID. I graduated in May of 2020, so at the worst possible time. And I thought I was doing really great because I got a job pretty much right away when most of my friends during COVID didn't get a job for a year or more out of college because nobody was hiring. So went straight into an in-house marketing team, thought that was pretty great. Worked there for 2 years. Asked that company if I could switch to remote because I was sitting by myself in an office 8 hours a day. I was the only person doing social media. I barely had to collaborate with anyone. Asked if I could work remote. They said, no, you'll have to quit. I did quit. I quit and thought I would go do a little bit of traveling, had a stint as a tour guide in Japan. So we can get into that later. But for just about 4 or 5 months, and I came back and could not get a job again. I was unemployed, couldn't get back into marketing for almost 2 years after that. And luckily, I switched into freelancing, which is where I am now, which I love. And I like it so much more than an in-house team. I'm fully remote. I work for clients that are doing really cool things, that I get to choose what industries I want to be in. And it's been really great. So now I'm thinking I'd like to stay freelancing and have a job that allows flexibility. My friends are very jealous. So I think right now I'm on track for where I want to be, working with clients I enjoy, with the flexibility to balance my life and do some traveling on the side and just keep on keeping on with this. And I feel incredibly, incredibly grateful because those 2 years in the middle were so bad. And I have a lot of friends who are still in that time point and have not kind of made it out to this part of their career yet.
Terrific. Thanks for the intro. Let's take that apart piece by
Yeah.
piece because you covered a lot of ground. A lot of it
Yes.
exemplifies your generation in terms of opportunity, in terms of attitude. So you graduated, you got your BA in marketing,
Yes.
communications.
Yeah.
Okay. So you had the intent from the get-go of a career trajectory in marketing, advertising, and comms. Is that right?
Yes.
Okay. And then the second thing that you mentioned, which I find fascinating too, is the reality of virtual work. So this was unheard of for, and I will say my generation and most generations going back 5 years, really
Mm,
unheard of 10 years ago. It was
mm,
obviously precipitated by the pandemic in terms of it becoming endemic, if you will. The
mm,
option for working from home and even a hybridized approach was around, but it was virtually unthinkable for an
mm,
individual to do the totality of their position outside an office.
mm. You know
And
what's
the
kind of
fact
crazy? My dad happened to be remote almost my entire life. Like 15, 20 years ago, he's been remote the entire time. So I had a very spoiled vision of the possibilities of remote before COVID. And I actually went into college choosing digital marketing with the planning that it was remote friendly and that I would always want to look for remote work.
That's fascinating, and with the ancillary assumption that you could be a digital nomad. So it
Yeah.
sounds like you're on the road. You love to travel, which is
Mm.
another innate characteristic of the Zoomer. You guys are zooming.
We're zooming. Yeah.
You're zooming. So your attitude toward work is very, very different from the attitude of prior generations.
Mm,
This idea of mobility, of flexibility, of scalability, and of
mm,
integrating a lifestyle inclusive of even travel.
mm,
So you don't preclude travel from day-to-day responsibilities.
mm.
And this idea of it being digital at the core. So I'm also tacitly assuming that digital marketing was your point of focus.
Yes, and I was actually part of Arizona State University's flagship group of specifically social media marketing. They had just created that program, and I was in the first group to finish that.
And again, for my ears, I mean, I'm obviously accustomed to it. It's a centerpiece to my career. My career has evolved in parallel to the evolution of digital communications. But just to give you a little flavor, and I think many of our listeners could relate to this, I grew up with a black and white television. I am a cusp
Mm-hmm.
boomer. I'm 1964.
Mm-hmm.
So I grew up with a black and white cathode ray television, which was enormous,
Mm,
weighed probably 1,000 pounds, and I had four television stations. It was CBS, NBC, ABC, and the local WGN TV, Chicago. The
mm.
only ability that I had to select content was to turn the channel, to physically turn the dial on the box,
Right.
and once a week, a printed TV guide arrived in the mail. So I
Yeah.
could scan through the programming and be on the receiving end of broadcast transmissions. In
Right.
addition to that, I could read magazines, but there was zero interactivity with media. None. I was a
Mm,
passive recipient and I had no control over content. In the
mm,
movie theaters, movies would come in and then they would vanish. Then they would be chopped up and put on broadcast TV, the Saturday night TV show, with interruptions, commercial interruptions, and editing. And I
mm,
never had an opportunity to select content, let alone engage with it. So the
mm.
environment that you've grown up in, this idea of being the digital native, which I'm sure you take for
Yeah.
granted, is such a state change. It is an absolute paradigm shift that impacts so
Mm,
much of our lives that now we all take for granted.
yeah.
So so with that enormous opportunity
Mm.
comes some of the difficulties. So,
Problems.
so the challenges, right? So So just out of curiosity, you had a social media focus from the beginning, knowing that you could incorporate that directly into your career.
Mm.
Have you felt the downside of social media in terms of everything from bullying to peer pressure to the democracy destroying aspects of social media run amok, at least according to some?
Absolutely 100%. I will not in any way defend social media as a whole. I think it's an extremely double-edged sword. I think all those bad things are true. People have, I think, mental health issues from it. People are addicted to it, especially women. Body confidence. These people are editing their bodies online. You think it's real. Everyone has plastic surgery. They're denying it. But then also, I rely on social media for most of my information. I don't always take things at face value, but where there's smoke, there's fire sometimes. And when you see something keep coming up online again and again and again, you look into it more. Whereas I would say I'm quite distrustful of big media stations and Fox News or whatever it is, where the information's coming from a source you don't know. So I would be very, very scared if the government or it's come up with TikTok were to cut us off from social media completely, because that's where we crowdsource most of our information, which I think they kind of don't like.
How would you describe your skepticism of information from zero, it's all fake news and manipulation, to
Yeah.
10, which is it's authoritative institutional truth? How do you
From
feel about the content that you engage with?
on major broadcast stations or online?
In general, because
Yeah.
the boundaries between these sources have become increasingly ambiguous.
Yes, that's true. Overall, and actually, it's kind of the same answer for both, so I don't know why I asked. Highly skeptical of everything. I would say like two or a three. I don't trust anything. But the thing with social media is that you can check that information 20 times in half an hour. Whereas if you hear it on broadcast television, you can't find any other opinion on it. So if you see a video on Instagram, you can read the comments and see the opinions and thoughts of 1,000 other people. Whereas broadcast, all you get is what you're told. So it's a little bit harder to uh, hear a different perspective.
Yeah, I can relate. I remember I was at my friend's house in Manhattan a few years ago, and she got the Sunday edition of the New York Times physically printed. And
Yeah.
I had been a digital guy going back to the turn of the millennia, even being this old guy.
Mm.
And it was astonishing to me that this huge wad of paper sat there on her kitchen table, and I started to flip through it. And I came to the realization that the placement of the articles were integral to their prioritization. So it was a
Mm.
linear experience. I read an article and I realized that I couldn't instantaneously comment on it or share it.
Mm.
My fingers were covered in ink, and I couldn't
Yeah.
believe that this was the source of information going
Yeah.
back forever. And this
Yeah.
digital thing was all new. But
Yeah.
conversely, and again, here's the boomer benchmark that I'm providing. We trusted sources of information.
Right.
When Walter Cronkite was on TV and he told the
Hmm.
American people that the Vietnam War might not be winnable, that
Yeah.
might have been after the fact, but that was a state change in the
Right.
public's perception. One guy on the news
Hmm.
did that. When TV shows cut new ground in terms of, let's say, making the gay lifestyle or alternative lifestyles
Right.
acceptable on comedy shows or TV shows, this impacted an overall cultural transformation because you didn't have the media fragmentation that you have these days that you're describing. This
Right.
like nanosecond update of data from 37 different sources simultaneously blasted on your phone that you
Right.
could instantaneously and effortlessly virally share with your
Mm,
friends and everyone else. So, this dynamic, fragmented content that you have been living in pretty much your whole adult life has
right.
transformed the landscape in a way where it's awesome. You're getting
Mm,
tons of information you never did before, but you're expressing this inherent skepticism about all information,
mm,
which to a boomer's ears is astonishing because again we grew up
mm.
trusting and believing only a
But
handful of authoritative news sources. What we heard, well, that's how it was.
But it's like, how can you even trust the major news sources when they're not aligning? I mean, if you switch between MSNBC and then you go to Fox, they're pointing fingers at each other and saying each other's lying like 5-year-olds. I mean, they just seem so ridiculous to me. Maybe if there was a news source I could trust, I would trust it, but they don't seem very trustworthy.
Well, you're revealing something incredibly insightful and transformative because this has percolated into our politics to the point that it's become foundational and decisive. And nowadays, as you're alleging and believing in, that there is no fundamental truth
Yeah,
and that it's dependent on point of view.
yeah, yeah. I think that everything now and for most of my life is so opinionated. I don't think anything is black and white where you could ever have someone come on TV like Walter Cronkite and say the answer. Like, this is our opinion on the Vietnam War. I don't think we have a source like that anymore.
What does that do though for your feelings about other sources of information, not just news and politics, but what you might be hearing in business, what you might be hearing in terms of acquiring data for
Yeah.
campaigns you might even run, for the campaigns that you are running? How has
Yeah.
that influenced your attitude toward content strategy and
Mm,
advertising and engagement within the marketing career that you've chosen?
yeah. I mean, you see on LinkedIn, now LinkedIn has become some influencer hub and everyone has something to say. And if you scroll on LinkedIn for an hour, you're going to see conflicting information 10 different times. Someone's going to say, do ads like this. Someone's going to say, do ads like that. I just stick to what I've seen with my own eyes or what I hear from close, trusted sources.
Yeah, that's fascinating in terms of the standard for excellence and
Mm,
even table stakes of what one needs to excel at
mm,
anything seems to be kind of all over the place depending
yeah.
on your source and depending on your goal, which
Mm,
could also be contested as arbitrary or fleeting or depending on the source, right?
yeah. And my dad has said that he's just so shocked and he's a boomer. I think he was born in 62 maybe. That he is just so shocked by what he sees with his own eyes happening with his kids. There's 5 kids, so I'm the middle of 5 kids. What he sees happening in our lives and in our careers compared to what he hears in the news and the media, that unemployment is the lowest it's ever been, or this is happening with the economy, or we're adding this many jobs. And at one point, 3 of the 4 kids in the workforce were unemployed and couldn't find a job. So he was like, I'm just not seeing where this data is coming from when all my kids, all my friends' kids, all the kids' friends are facing the same issue.
Yeah, so where does that leave you in
Mm.
terms of feelings of security and focus and forward direction? How does this underbelly of questioning everything make you
Yeah.
feel about your career in the world?
It feels really bad, you feel like you're crazy. I mean, you get told, you go to college, you get a degree, you work hard, you're gonna have this nice life where you're taken care of. And it was so not my experience. And then you're 25 years old, you're unemployed, you've applied for 400 jobs, you think you're a smart person, you can't get hired for even the most basic entry level role that you've already done before. And then the news or the media and the statistics are saying that it's not happening, that like we're hiring so many people, it's actually just that Gen Z doesn't want to work, they're bad workers, whatever. And it's just crazy. Like, we don't want to work, all my friends are unemployed, and no one will hire us, so you feel like you're going crazy.
Yeah, you bring up a key point that I wanted to touch on, which is this paradox that I don't think that there's been a generation this hyper educated, self aware, engaged in as far as information goes,
Mm,
and at the same time so frustrated about the paucity of career opportunities and
mm,
also the paucity of living that American dream that was
mhm,
tacitly understood as a given.
mhm. I would say a lot of my friends, and I think myself too, grew up, turned skeptic pretty early, watching the 2008 economic situation, and my parents had a lot of trouble with that, and my dad lost his job, and I think a lot of kids saw the same thing happening and started wondering how secure we would be in the future with our jobs. And then you hear that, was it millennials or Gen Z are the first generation to expected to have a lower quality of life than the generation before them. And so I grew up kind of jaded that American dream, or the, buying a house and having a family on one income, was possible for me. And so I never felt very comfortable in uh, that path. And it proved, I think, to be quite true. My friends who've been incredibly hard workers and loyal and stayed at one company have been laid off like it was nothing and without a career. I think a lot of people are underpaid. You're not getting promoted unless you job hop, and then they tell you not to job hop, but they're also not paying you to stay at the company. So I think all of kind of our concerns about what we saw coming in the workforce for us turned out to be true.
And how has that influenced your attitude toward work, toward the companies that you work
Yeah.
with and for?
Yeah. Being that time that I was unemployed made me quite unhappy with large corporations and being an employee. And I think a lot of people my age are very, very attracted to entrepreneurial pursuits, including myself. Freelancing has been great. I feel so much more secure freelancing, where I know if I were to lose one client, I have three more, and my income is a little bit diversified. And again, it gives me more freedoms and more security than if I was to be at a large company. And then, of course, the best situation, I think, would be to start your own business, but that's a whole nother beast. So I, at this point, seeing what's happened to my friends and myself, feel quite skeptical about putting trust and loyalty into a company, because they haven't shown us any reason to believe in it. They want to act like it's our fault, we don't stick at companies anywhere, but I think they've treated us really badly.
Yeah, so I'm hearing a Gen Z touche, which
Yeah.
is you're educated, you're empowered, you're an excellent worker, you're conscientious, you're willing
Mhm.
to burn the midnight oil, you're
Mm,
flexible, and what companies are doing are underpaying you, laying you off, and
mm,
treating you as expendable. And
mm.
your response to that is only a natural one, which is okay, if we're expendable, then so are you. And
Yeah.
thanks to the digital infrastructure that we grew up within, that we are thoroughly comfortable with, we will adapt that flexibility that you're putting on
Mm,
us to
mm.
maximizing our own self-interest, which is we'll
Yeah.
stay mobile, we'll stay flexible. If you're not
Yeah.
loyal to us, we won't be loyal to you. And as you also mentioned, this opportunity for freelance or gig work
Yeah,
can get us by, can give us the variety we need, and then can enable us to do some of the fun things that we want, which is like travel
yeah.
and enjoy life, knowing that we can't afford a house anyway.
Exactly. I mean, my brother graduated from UPenn, University of Pennsylvania, went straight into a job at Google, worked at Google for 5 years, got laid off. They didn't even tell him. He woke up in the morning and all of his electronics were shut off, and his coworker had to tell him he'd been laid off, and then he couldn't find a job for 2 years, and he was unemployed for 2 years after working at Google for 5 years and getting laid off overnight for nothing. Like, wow, wow.
Yeah, and that's again in the tech world the blue chip company.
Yeah.
And if Google is doing that, then imagine the startup universe or even the in-between universe where scalability and agility are cherished, but often at the expenditure of the number one overhead, which is staff.
Yeah. Yeah, I think you just really get the feeling like you are nothing to these companies. There is no loyalty from their end to you. I think that people used to stay at companies for 25 years on the assumption that the company would take care of you. And I just don't think you can count on that anymore. And you need to be fast enough to adapt to a changing career. And my career has changed so many times, 3 times or 4 times, to be where I am now.
So what is your golden ticket? What after being through what you've been through in only a
Mhm.
few short years after
Yeah.
graduating, what would you consider home? What would you consider an ideal situation which balances off all of these contradictory forces that you're experiencing right now?
Yeah. You know what? Kind of where I am right now, which has a huge part in thanks to you. And it's that I, would like to say I do good work. I think that every client I've worked for has been very happy with me. My company was very happy with me. Um, and to get a good enough reputation with my freelancing that I can pick and choose clients as I want and that work with my lifestyle, which is where I'm at now. And like I mentioned, you have that security of a diversified income. So kind of just keep on with this freelancing right now. I obviously you don't get the benefits and stuff, but I make so much more money freelancing than as an employee that I think it more than covers my benefits.
So that's very interesting because just to give the listeners a little bit of background, you were referred to me. I was
Yeah.
in need of a great social media marketing all around person.
Yeah.
And I interviewed you and we had a chit chat and you basically leaped into the trenches and you excelled
Yeah.
in every way. And the evolution that I've seen you go through, which you just vocalized, is when you started, you were really looking at this opportunity to freelance
Mm.
as a stepping stone toward what would be considered a more traditional career situation. I want
Yeah.
a job in a company. I want the security of having that. And I'm looking at freelancing, the gig economy, consulting work
Mm.
as a means to an end. And
Mm.
if I'm hearing you correctly, over the course of 6 months or so,
Mm.
you've come to the realization, maybe in conjunction with this kind of work, but also experiencing similar success elsewhere, that this approach gives you the flexibility that you enjoy with
Mm.
an income that's sustainable and that can also scale.
Mm. Yeah, I mean, it's scary having to worry about contracts and clients and everything, but I also think it's scary to know you could wake up one morning with your electronics shut off and find out that you've been laid off from the company that you've been loyal to for 5 years. So sometimes when I think I would like to be an employee, I think about all my friends who've been laid off and feel glad that I can hunt down my own work constantly.
Yeah, there seems to be a state change that's going on, not only in US politics, but frankly throughout the world, which is our global comeuppance, if you will. And it might be a result also of being in the wake of the pandemic. So we had this health crisis, which impacted every aspect of everyone's life down to the core of our economy, a once a century phenomena. And
Mm,
we reacted to it in a very contemporary way in the States with flooding the zone with borrowed money.
mm,
The result was fairly predictable in terms of inflation
mm,
and blowing up the economy, if you will, with literally trillions of dollars of money from nowhere.
mm,
And there's been a rebound effect.
mm,
And throughout the world, again, not only politically, but economically, there's been this sense of hitting the gas a little bit too hard.
mhm.
And I get the feeling, and I think you're reiterating it in ways too, that it's kind of payback time.
Yeah.
That the era of limitless salaries and jobs and homes and resources up, 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 up. We
Mm,
are growing and we continue to grow is now taking a huge reality check.
mm,
And you're swept up in it. Your entire generation is at the apex of this because you are riding in a sense on the fumes of the prior generation's effort, but at the
mm,
same time you're dealing with the direct consequences of this pullback, all
mm.
the cuts, all the saving, this sense that instead of the sky being the limit, it's like we got to dig ourselves into the basement so we could, hide from the consequences of our own indulgence.
Right. And the
And
thing is, oh, go ahead.
no, please, please.
You mentioned payback time, and the first thing I thought was like, payback for who? Because they're saying they need to make all these layoffs. They need to cut back the worst workforce, and they overhired. And then all of these companies that are saying that are recording record profits. The CEOs are making more than they ever have made before. At the same time, they're turning around and telling you, we're cutting you off because we don't have the budget for you. So again, that's where that distrust of information comes from, where you're seeing something with your own eyes. They're making more money than ever. At the same time, they're telling you, we're so sorry, COVID, it's inflation, and they call it greedflation. There's really how much of this needs to be done versus how much are they blaming on COVID just so they can get away with something that's actually the best situation they've ever had.
Yeah, I think you're bringing something up that's very acute and increasingly impacting everyday Americans' attitude toward our culture, our politics, and our economy. The sense of income disparity. It was significant when I was growing up, too. But when you
Right.
had the value of a home was probably 1/10, an order of a magnitude, at least less
Mm,
than it is right now. The
mm,
idea that you could live in a home that was bigger and better than your parents wasn't only an option, but it was expected. There was
mm-hmm.
this general feeling that life and everything about it would improve generation to generation. And
Yeah.
with that, there was the feeling that the rising tide will raise all boats, that the middle
Mhm.
class was flourishing and it would continue to flourish.
Yeah.
I'm from emigre parents. My parents
Mm,
are both Hungarians by way of Venezuela. And there's been these waves of immigrants, and the parents of the children always felt that they came to this country for a better life. And it
mm,
was tacitly assumed that the way forward was up, up, up. And ironically enough, you are born in this country
mm.
and you are feeling the opposite of that, despite the fact that, to your point, whose sins are you paying for?
Yeah.
You've done everything that they asked you to do, and you're knocking it out of the park in droves.
Mm,
And yet, the billionaires are making more money,
mm.
and you are getting laid off.
Yeah.
And I mean that in a rhetorical you, because
Yeah.
no one should ever lay Hannah off because you're the best.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. Yeah. No, I agree with you. Um, and I will, let's put out there, as you know, which is maybe why you asked me to do this. I would say I have particularly strong opinions on the topic. Obviously, I'm taking this call with you from Japan because I spend a lot of my time outside of America kind of exactly for this reason. Some of my friends are more hopeful about the situation there than me. I'm particularly um, independent in the way that I feel like you guys aren't going to treat me good. I'm going to make my own career. I'm going to figure it out myself. And I don't need a big company to take advantage of me, and I'll do it myself. So that I am very heavy on that compared to some of my friends who do work at these big corporations and are hoping for the best. But my opinion is that the best is not coming and you better figure it out.
Yeah, and to me, hearing you say that, there's an inherent paradox in the Gen Z background and outlook, which is on the one hand, you marginalize me and you take me for granted, so I will do the same for you. Thank you very much, and I will take that same agile approach that you're taking with me with my employers. And
Mm-hmm.
it also sounds like it's fairly empowering, which is you're picking up skills that you might not have had before. You're
Yeah.
learning very early on that virtually every employee, actually every employee from the proverbial janitor to the CEO is expendable.
Mhm.
And there's nothing certain in the world of business. And from a very young age, you have picked this up as part of your DNA. And if
Yeah.
nothing else, that gives you incredible stamina and strength
Yeah.
to face both uncertainty, but also leap on opportunities that you might not have before for
Yeah.
fear of disrupting your own status quo. So I actually see a lot of positive coming out of this
Yeah.
corner that you've been put in.
Yeah. And I have a friend, one of my best friends, has worked in email marketing for Amex for a couple of years now, 3 or 4 years. And she hasn't been promoted the whole time. She's stuck in line waiting for a middle management position that they won't give her until it opens up, and some corporate hoo-ha stuff. And she's been looking for a job on the side to make a move out of Amex, but she hasn't found anything better. And she's been doing that exact same role for so long. All she knows is exactly what she does, is email marketing in this setting. And she's asking me a lot about my freelancing career and how maybe she could move into that. But I feel very lucky that, a little bit lucky that my situation has turned out this way, where I started at a small company where I was doing all of the social media myself, learned so many things. And then through freelancing, every contract and gig is different. You need to do different things. I'm very comfortable jumping into things I know 75% about and learning the other 25 when I'm there. And I have a very flexible skill set. I can do so many different parts of digital marketing. And that's because I haven't been pigeonholed as an employee in a mega company where if she gets laid off, all she knows how to do is that email marketing role. And that makes it very hard for her to accept opportunities that could be great if she had a little bit bigger skill set.
Yeah, and again, I think that this is definitely the silver lining to the chaos and
Yeah.
anxiety, which
Yeah.
is it's forced a Darwinian kind of situation of natural selection
Yes.
in hiring, in staffing, and in personal empowerment and career building. If you
Yeah.
take it upon yourself with the acknowledgement that no road is safe and
Yeah.
that a singular road is dangerous because it heightens your vulnerability, then there's this acknowledgement that I need to wear many hats, be skilled in many kinds of specialties, and maintain the flexibility that's demanded of a dynamic, chaotic marketplace and world. So it's toughening you up, it's making you invincible, and it's also training you in areas that might have been neglected before out of necessity.
Yeah. And like we said earlier, like you said, how do I how do I know what information to trust, or how skeptical am I of information? And I said, just going off what you see. And they tell you, still, they're telling us job hopping is bad. Don't leave your company. Don't do this. Don't do that. But I've done all the things they don't want you to do, which is to take control of your career a little bit and not believe in a corporate life, not put all your trust and all your loyalty into one corporate job. And now all my friends who have done that are asking me, how can they start doing what I'm doing? And I tell them it was terrible to get here. I thought my life and my career was over. And then you kind of get spit out the other side. And I've gotten to this really good place, but it feels really wrong. Like you're doing all the wrong things. And now I actually do feel like I've had more stability than ever before. I'm making more money than ever before. And I feel better about the future of my career than ever before.
Terrific. So
Yeah.
it's kind of like we're in a time of disruption,
Mm.
and disruption has precipitated these seismic problems that have seemed intractable to the point that the system, in all of its different expressions, is about to break.
Mm.
Thomas Kuhn was a philosopher of science, and he wrote a really important book called The Nature of Scientific Revolutions. And it applies, I believe, not only to the sciences, but to economics and even career building. And the essence of it is that revolutions don't happen unless they're forced to happen.
Yeah.
You reach a state of crisis, and this could be physics or it could be one's own career. And it forces you to evolve and change and bring about what he calls a paradigm shift. Your entire model changes, how you view the world, how you view yourself. And it could be really refreshing if you have the wherewithal, courage, and ability to come out the other end.
Yeah.
You are transformed. It's like constraints engender creativity, no pain, no gain, no risk, no reward. And the payback for all of that anxiety and difficulty and uncertainty is a reinvented career and maybe even a reinvented identity.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. And I think sometimes, the clashing heads of boomers and zoomers comes from the fact that boomers don't like me. I don't know what you would call our attitude towards this, the skepticism or whatever, but they don't like us job hopping, apparently, or leaving companies. But then you look at the data, the numerical data of people's salary growth when you leave jobs every 2 years or so. And it's exponentially higher than people who stay at the companies. So I don't understand how we're getting the bad rep for following the obvious data showing that this is the best idea for us. And then they get mad that that's what we're doing.
Well, we grew up with that. I remember putting together a resume, and I was explicitly instructed that if you had a job for under a year, or it's even more extreme than that at some point, under 3 years, and you're a air quote job hopper and you're
Right.
unreliable and no one will hire you because you have zero loyalty.
Right.
And that's just proven incorrect. In my career, I have made significant jumps by jumping companies,
Mm-hmm.
as has everyone else that I know, inclusive of yourself.
Mm-hmm.
And it's counterintuitive to how people do business, which
Mm-hmm.
is you want new talent and companies are changing. So if companies are hemorrhaging staff and then picking them back up again,
Mm-hmm.
then it's almost expected that you have this kind of turnover. It's just an inevitable part of life and business
Mm-hmm.
at this time. And with that, there are other habits too. So, for example, I remember, one of your big complaints was that you're an awesome digital marketer,
Mm-hmm.
and you are applying to health and life science agencies, and the HR teams wouldn't even look at you, let alone interview you, because you had no air quote direct experience in
Yeah,
the industry.
crazy.
And you complained about that, and I told you that this is another foolish prejudice. Because if you're a good social media marketer, if you are a good marketing person, then it's form and content. If you're a writer, you could write a book about ladybugs or a book about neutron stars. It
Yeah.
doesn't matter. You're a good communicator. And same rules apply for someone exactly like yourself. You learn quickly.
Yeah.
You leap on the job, and you're reliable and you do great work.
Yeah.
And for the little amount of time it would train you to work within a particular vertical, they're dismissing you as inexperienced. And that, I think, we should add to this boomer prejudice
Mm.
of excluding people from jobs that would otherwise be great for them.
Yeah. And again, that's something that it seems like they're still holding us to an expectation that they're not delivering on anymore. That they used to train people for jobs, or so I hear. I've never really gotten to experience that, but that there was much stronger mentoring in the past. Whereas now it seems like they won't look at you if you don't already have the experience that they won't let you get with them. So it's very confusing.
Yeah, you're listing out these Zoomer catch 22s,
Yeah.
which is you need a stalwart, resolute resume
Mm.
showing loyalty, and yet they will fire you on a dime.
Mm.
They're demanding experience within their particular vertical, yet they are unable or unwilling to do much, if any, onboarding.
Yeah. It's crazy. Crazy.
Yes, yes.
Crazy.
And I think part of this, I think you're very astute in pointing out that part of this is a generation gap where the old way of looking at hiring, at HR, at recruiting, at training, at aligning people to jobs that fit their strengths and dismiss their weaknesses
Mm.
is 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 precluding really the evolution into what's a much more contemporary and effective point of view, that is this agile approach, that
Mm.
people are changing jobs, that people learn fast, that digital has accelerated everything, and that
Yeah.
we all need to grow up and just smell the coffee as
Yeah.
to what's actually going on here instead of clinging
Yeah.
to antiquated ideas, and we'll all be happier for it, boomer and zoomer alike.
Yeah. And that's why I'm finding now that it's so much better just to build a personal reputation for myself that I do good work, that I can do any industry and I will do it well and to the best of my ability. So that kind of as the hiring process changes, I hope that's where people start to move towards letting go of this idea that people will be doing one role. They'll be doing email marketing, the tiniest niche of email marketing for their entire career, and rather hiring people who just do good work. So I'm hoping to catch that wave and keep going on that.
Absolutely. And you obviously exhibit all the qualities of a type A, self actualized, really smart, really motivated, zero BS person
Yeah.
who is not only willing to do that, but very, very much able.
Hmm.
The flip side of it is, what about those who aren't able to do it?
Yeah.
Or I'm sure many folks who might be listening to this are though, oh, that sounds good, Hannah. You
Yeah.
know that you have the luxury to
Yeah.
be eager and willing and able to do these things. But what about the rest of us?
Yeah. Well, that's where all my friends they
Right.
they say that looks great. How do I how the heck do I do that? And I have to tell them it's really hard. I was working at Starbucks for 8 months. I mean, I'd had a career in marketing and got booted out and had to go and work at Starbucks. And so it really is hard and I have to learn a lot on the go and by myself. When you're a contractor, you usually don't have anyone to ask questions to. So you have to be able to solve the problems. And the bad news is that if you can't do that, you have to hope for the best and hope you don't get laid off.
I think that's very, very, very perceptive. And
Yeah.
I think I think given everything that's happening and that's self-evident in our current politics, our current government, it's becoming an increasingly Darwinian ecosystem. The
Hmm.
idea that we have special treatment for special needs people, and by that I don't mean the handicap per se. I'm talking
Yeah.
about anyone who unlike yourself is not as much a go-getter.
Yeah.
Like this idea of providing support, especially providing extra support to any segment that ostensibly needs it or asks for it is starting to be whittled away. The fact that there's extra money to spend on anything extraneous is being whittled away. And you
Yeah.
have this polarization in our economy that is exacerbating our economic disparities. So the rich are getting richer, the poor are getting poorer, and it really boils down to the individual to do whatever they can for themselves and their families because the government is taking less of a role to support them. And
Mm.
now, just as you're describing, businesses are increasingly taking less and less of a role to provide the full 360 care and support that the
Mm.
boomer generation has been used to.
I have an example. My number one enemy, who's I'm watching my friend just get screwed over so bad by them. NBC Sports, putting it out there. He is the most talented person at his job. He is so good at his job, but he is very much the opposite of me in that he would never freelance. That's way too stressful for him. He wants to be at one company. He wants the consistency of a salary. And he's been with NBC Sports for what, 3 or 4 years, doing incredible work. I see his work. I could never do what he does. And he makes less than half the money I do. And they have not moved substantially promoted him. They've like changed his title a little bit and his pay a little bit. And he works on site in New York City. And I just can't believe that they would treat such a good worker who's been there for so long the way that they treat him. It drives me nuts. And I want to just shake him by his shoulders and be like, you have to leave this company. Like, you deserve so much more money and care for the work that you're doing for them. And they're just taking advantage of good workers like that so badly.
Yeah, the pendulum swings, right? And we're in an era right now for a lot of the historical and cultural and political reasons that we've been talking about, where that pendulum is swinging toward increasingly selfish and frankly greedy companies. It's a
Yeah.
top-down approach and workers who are either acquiescing and suffering from it, or workers who are rebelling and reveling in new
Yeah.
opportunities such as yourself for personal growth and saying a big fu to the man and doing it a way where the man still needs you,
Yeah.
but it's now under new terms.
Yeah.
And that I think is part of this paradox that if you have the wherewithal and gumption and ability, you can actually turn the system on its head and make it beneficial for you. But
Mm.
if you don't, then you're going to acquiesce and really become the proverbial victim
Hmm.
of all the changes that are laying off thousands of people and basically redistributing the wealth throughout society.
Yeah. I think that all my friends know that they're not in a great spot, but they're not sure where to go instead. They know that they could be laid off. They know that they're not being paid enough, but what can they do? Unless you're willing to freelance or pick up new skills, you're really stuck with that.
And frankly, I don't see a way out of this. I see what the trends that we've been talking about for the past few minutes. I think they're going to get even more intense and extreme and not less so. So
Yeah.
that pendulum that I was describing is not at full swing. It's not even close. We're
Mm,
kind of in the beginning of that stride toward the other end of the spectrum where
no.
it's dog eat dog, every man and woman and whomever you are for him, her, they, themselves.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So what are we gonna do? And then speaking of pronouns, what about AI? who
Oh man.
who is the ghost in the machine with every pronoun and none
Oh,
of them? So
like there's nothing I want more than to have had the economy and the job situation that the boomers had. I mean, what would I love more than to go to school, go straight into a company and work there for 25 years and not worry about money? I mean, what would be better than that? And it's just not the cards we've been dealt. And now we also have robots coming to take all of our jobs. So there's that too. It just seems like the gift that
right.
keeps on and they want to know why we're not happy with the workforce. I mean, did you have robots taking over the world when you were 27? Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, we just had a black and white TV, remember?
Right,
And then when the space shuttle blew up, that was the biggest catastrophe ever, let
right.
alone the catastrophe ostensibly of the robots about to take over the world. So these are key points. That's been kind of the robot in the room, if you will, the
Yeah.
HAL 9000 in the
Yeah.
centerpiece of our conversation, which is
Yeah.
further fueling that pendulum and that implosion of the old way of doing things is the automation that's already cringing into our workforce. So
Yeah.
let me ask you, how do you interact with AI? I remember in November of 2022, seems like yesterday, when I first heard of ChatGPT and I first fired it
Yeah.
up on my laptop, my jaw dropped and I wrote a blog post on Medium saying that this was the end of the old world. And
Yeah.
that wasn't particularly prescient. You didn't need to
Uh,
be a rocket or computer scientist to realize, even in those early moments, that everything had changed.
yeah.
So fast forward to now, 2025, and
Yeah.
speaking with the Gen Z Zoomer representative of your generation,
Yeah.
what was your exposure to AI? How do you use AI? And
Yeah.
what's your feeling about it aside from it being an existential threat to your job?
Yeah. I think that AI can be an incredible global revolutionary invention if it was used in the right way. Do I have any faith at all it's going to be used in the right way? No. Bill Gates said,
Yeah.
"Oh, AI is most helpful for education and medicine, where like you could use AI doctors to give medical diagnosis to people in Africa where they might not have access to the same level of medical care." And that's an incredible use of AI. Or you can give computers that can teach entire courses and degrees to people where they can't access that education. Amazing use of AI. Basic blog posts or building a structure for simple topics saves you so much time. Amazing use of AI. When we start putting thousands and thousands of people out of work with nowhere else for them to go, not a great use of AI. And I'm not sure that's not going to happen.
How about evolution, though? You just spent the last few minutes talking about how you were painted against the boomer's wall and
Yeah.
you got yourself out of a predicament by redefining the parameters of the room, of the paint,
Mm,
and of the whole process. Do you see a silver lining in the AI boom? Is there an opportunity for smart, motivated people such as yourself to ride the AI
yeah.
bull? So
You know,
instead of being the China in the China shop, you could ride the bull, so to speak,
yeah.
of the AI surge.
Yeah, I mean, I'm trying to keep my eyes open, same as always, and if I see a place to opportunity like we were talking about, I'll jump in. I'll jump on it. If I see bad things coming towards where I'm at and somewhere that I could do better, I'll go for it. But I worry for all the people that won't do that, and I hope that this doesn't cause problems for a lot of hardworking people.
Yeah, because the next evolution from the chatbot box, you go
Mm,
to ChatGPT, you go to Grok, you go to Claude, any of them. It's the little Google box back again, right? But instead of giving you a list of website and links, it actually goes to the data, aggregates it, slices
mm,
it, and dices it, and regurgitates it. All of these AI bots have the IQ of maybe a mouse, maybe a
yeah,
house cat at
yeah,
best. It is not nearly sentient. It is in
right.
no way self-aware. There isn't a little gnome in there like reading Hegel and writing your essay. It's basically matrix math with
Yeah,
these large language models that are meticulously trained.
yeah.
And even though the Chinese have taught us how to do it with 1/10, 1/100th the chip
Mm,
power and cost
mm,
recently, kind of shaking up the whole AI industry, the transformer technology that's at the heart of it is still fairly deterministic.
mm,
So there's no sentience there, and there's no real creativity, but they're
yeah,
working on it. And you know
yeah,
that they're going to crack that too. And I would
yeah.
be even so bold as to say that the idea of a sentient machine could very
Mm,
much be realized within your lifetime. So that
yeah,
idea of a conscious being in a box, or
yeah.
more likely at the end of a robot, because you need some kind of interaction with the world, you need intentionality,
Mm,
will become manifest. And it could even happen through simulations, right? Like we
mhm,
grew up in an evolving ecosystem, simulate a digital environment, put a proto consciousness in it, and then
mm,
just set it loose as an emergent, evolving phenomena, so that when we do see that brain in a box, we
mm,
have no idea how it works. None.
yeah,
Well, if depending on who you talk to, including the
yeah,
grandfather of AI, we at this point don't know how a lot of the AI
yeah.
gizmos work. It's gotten to the point where they are programming themselves. Ooh,
Yeah.
scary. the
Ooh.
only the only reason I bring all that up is expect huge changes. Now we have the interim state of that box,
Yeah.
with agents. You can now go to the beta test of ChatGPT, and if you've got the premier subscription, you could have it take control of your computer, and you could ask it to find me the best flights and hotel rooms in
Really?
Tokyo, and it'll actually go to the
Really?
websites and book
Mm.
it for you. So so this is already happening.
Wow, I
These
didn't know
these
that. Yeah.
Okay, so the boomer is educating the
Yeah,
zoomer.
you're beating me. I gotta
So
go back.
go check it out. They're called
Yeah.
agents. So
Oh
you
my God.
could literally see it take over your computer, and then it'll
Yeah.
start moving your mouse. It'll start going to websites on its
Yeah.
own browser,
Yeah.
and it'll start doing research as if you're on the computer doing the research.
Wow. Yeah.
So
And
that's already happening. Now you see where I'm going with this. So I say, "Hey Hannah, put together a media plan, and we've
yeah.
got this target audience, and we need to put ads on Facebook and
Right.
Instagram, and check the budget and do that." And so what do? You go on your computer, and then you go to these websites, and you use the ad tools that are available to you to put together an ad campaign. Well, guess
Mm.
what? It's not far from one of these agents
Yeah.
actually doing all of these actions.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's where I think, it might not be a problem right now, but you need to look 5, 10 years out at positioning yourself. And like my friends who, they only do email marketing, whatever. What if the robot learns how to do your job, email marketing? What
Right.
are you going to do from then? So I think that Zoomers are facing, you can stay in that comfortable area that has worked for so long and be concerned for your stability and your future, or you have to leave that and scramble and be constantly working to improve and stay ahead of things. And hopefully, if it works out, you feel like you're in a better place. But there's definitely two different roads you could follow right now.
And it sounds like the smarter one is the more agile one. And you mentioned you framed it really, really well just a little while ago, where the air quote boomer mentality was that you fill out that checklist that society provides you at birth, which
Yeah.
is go to school, chew with your mouth closed,
Mm,
go to college, pick an undergraduate degree,
mm,
unless you're really into a profession like the law or medicine. You got your 4 years, you take your 4 years, and that's basically your ticket to ride to some job in some company. You
mm.
stay in that job 10, 20 years. You might have one or two job flips. Hopefully, you'll get promoted. You buy that house, you get married, you spawn, and then
Yeah.
you die. It sounds like the movie Train Spotting with Ewan
Yeah.
McGregor, if you saw that.
Yeah.
And then the Zoomer model. What I'm hearing from you is you could just kiss all that goodbye. There's no
Yeah.
job for 20 years. There's no house. It's more like the Talking Head song.
Yeah.
How did I get here? But instead of it being a midlife crisis for a boomer, it is a postgraduate crisis for a Zoomer who is like, wait a second, you made all these promises and I fulfilled each and every one, and you've pulled the rug out from under me.
You are spot on. I could not agree with you more.
So, with that, what do you recommend? And you've already hit on these, and I would love for this conversation to go positive and
Yeah.
to be aspirational. Because the
Asper-
sky isn't falling, and if we go back to that idea of revolutions are engendered
yeah.
by pain and they lead to paradigm shifts and hopefully better science and better society, it
Yeah.
would be nice to take that kind of Hegelian teleological view that we're on this inexorable path forward and upward, although
Yeah.
that might not be the case. What advice would you give your fellow Zoomers along the lines of what you've been talking about really throughout this conversation for maximizing their opportunities and minimizing their agony
Mm,
amidst chaos, amidst this boomer created chaos?
yeah. I think the good thing is that as more people see that our career paths are not as linear as they used to be, maybe for the boomers, and that reality, more and more people start to understand that has changed. We open up the doors to a really creative and fun career path. I've worked in so many industries. I've had a lot of really fun jobs where I got to do things I loved, and that we focus more on the person at their work ethic and what they're willing and able to do rather than a resume where you're just someone on paper and this is your experience. Looking instead at actually your thoughts and what you're able to deliver. So I hope that my friends will be valued for how smart they are and how good they are at their jobs rather than where they're coming from or what their career history has been.
So, if I'm hearing you right, and I can paraphrase you a little bit,
Mm,
character,
character.
the character of an applicant is significantly more important and exemplifies better the capacity of that worker to excel than a laundry list of apparent skills or capabilities.
I hope that's where we will get to. Yes.
Yeah, that's fascinating. I have a former colleague who's started a startup company where
Mm,
that's his mission. It's called Canny, Kanny, and it's a company that bases itself on evaluating a candidate's character at work rather than all these secondary and tertiary qualities, which, to your point, can be learned, are
yeah.
flexible, are
Yeah.
kind of modular components that you tack on to somebody. And
Yeah.
I would concur because I've worked with a lot of people over the course of a decades long career in marketing and advertising. And not to blow smoke up your parts, you exemplify an excellent hire You learn fast, you're conscientious, you're zero BS, and you're flexible to the point of being able to wear many hats and just take on responsibilities and deliver with zero drama and 100% efficacy. So I would just concur.
Yeah.
It's about character and aspects of character that are best in today's chaotic environment are aspects of character that have been best in every environment. So although the boomer landscape or ecosystem was exemplified by greater security, affordability of homes, more
Mm,
reliable career trajectories, same rules apply. If you've got
mm,
character, if you've got motivation, if you've got flexibility and wherewithal, then the world's your oyster. And if you
yeah.
rely on anyone else to support you, whether it's an individual, whether it's the government, whether it's a company, then you're doomed to be reliant on their generosity.
Yeah. Yeah. Agreed. Agreed.
Yay! Well, I think
Agree.
that's a great way to cap it. I would
Yeah.
love to talk to you again in, let's say, 6 months or maybe a year to
Yeah.
see how your career evolves and to see how our entire society, culturally, politically, economically,
Yeah.
is evolving along this trajectory that is so obvious right now.
Yeah.
It's everything has become Doge, regardless of which
Yes.
political aisle you sit on. We live in a Doge reality,
Yes.
and you're either going to adapt to that or you will be a victim of it.
Yeah.
And it doesn't matter about your politics, but the gravy train has come to its end, right?
Yeah.
It's a brave new world where we each need to do whatever we can to thrive and to learn and to grow.
Yeah.
And the parachute is all gone. There's no parachute. But in exchange for that, there's epic opportunity.
Yeah. Yeah. Very cool. And I don't even know if I mentioned that right now I'm working remote, and with this freelancing role, I'm doing a lot of traveling. As you know, I'm doing the whole digital nomad vibe. And that's incredible. I mean, no one before us has ever had that opportunity. It's such an incredible place to be if you can navigate your way through this constantly changing, crazy workforce.
Yeah, that's how we started this conversation, which to me was so striking that the
Yeah.
first observation that you shared about your Zoomer reality was virtual work.
Yeah.
And that might lie at cross currents to this trend to bring the workers back into the office, but
Mm,
news flash, corporate CEOs, you are hearing from a Zoomer herself exemplifying the sensibility of her entire generation, and she's of the brightest and the best. And
mm,
she is telling you, not to speak for you, but
mm.
screw your 9 to 5 in office work week. It
Yeah.
ain't gonna happen.
Yeah. Unless you can give me a contract that says we will employ you for 5 years with these pay bumps every 2 years, I don't buy it. I don't buy it.
Bingo, bingo. That's what's left out of this equation. Everyone's talking about productivity and team building and all this kind of stuff. But
Yeah.
the interests and the attitude of the employees themselves is being completely disregarded. And
Yeah.
the lens through which you are expressing those is one of being marginalized and discarded.
Yeah.
So either the businesses will have to change their attitude about how they treat you,
Mm,
or they're just going to get used to the fact that their brightest and best are
yeah.
in Tokyo, are in Ho Chi Minh City, are in Belize,
Exactly.
right? Right?
Exactly. I think that right now, like the most quote unquote successful Zoomers, that's where we're going. We're moving to remote work or freelance jobs and taking the freedom that comes with that.
I love this. I love how every action has a reaction. And
Mm-hmm.
although I really think you Zoomers have gotten certain aspects of the worst end of the boomer and millennial indulgence, you're also getting some of the good stuff. And
Yeah.
I think the greatest thing that either you've inherited or created for yourself is
Mm.
this FU attitude of independence and
Yeah.
freedom and flexibility. And I think that's the greatest takeaway, both for Gen Zers listening, for boomers like me who are learning things, and most significantly for companies who need to hire you because
Yeah.
you are the next generation of talent.
Yeah.
It's inexorable and inevitable that you Zoomers want freedom and flexibility, and you're willing to be treated like the commoditized employees that you already are in exchange
Yeah.
for that kind of flexibility.
Yeah. Definitely. I'd say boomers, share some wealth, spread the love, and Zoomers, keep your eyes open. Keep moving. Keep moving.
Awesome. I couldn't think of a better way to cap it. Thanks so much for your time, Hannah. I know that you're now in Tokyo. Is that right? Proving
I am.
your point.
Yes, I am
So
doing 2 months in Tokyo and then pop over to New Zealand, back to California.
astonishing. And you're just cranking away on your multiple projects while you're there. No problemo. And you're dealing with the 15, 16-hour time differential by just taking some naps.
I'm on 5 a.m. doing my
There,
presentation.
there you go. There you go. So listen up, HR departments. This is not only your future, but this is the brightest and best right now.
Yeah, just get it done. Get it
Get it
done.
done. Awesome, Hannah. Thank you so much. And let's catch up again in 6, 8 months to see how
All
things
right.
are going for you and how things are going for the whole economy.
All right. Fingers
Take
crossed. Well,
care.
thank you.
Thanks. Thanks so much. Bye bye.
Yeah. All right. Bye.